Under the blue sky, there stands a luxurious mansion, in no way inferior to a palace. It has everything, rich and luxurious interiors, and even a ducal title. The woman drinking tea is dressed in luxurious clothes and has excellent dignity and style. And the girl sitting opposite, also luxuriously dressed and drinking tea, has a simple expression on her face. She looked at the disgruntled lady who had it all, and it was her mother-in-law, Camilla. They sat opposite each other and drank tea, and something was brewing in the air. Suddenly, the Duchess forcefully put the mug of tea on the table, which frightened the girl a little. She asked her with a dissatisfied face why she again did not show signs of pregnancy. The girl, trying to hide her laughter behind a handkerchief raised to her mouth, apologized. The Duchess, looking at her angrily, said that she had said countless times that their family needed an heir. The girl even poked me after her words, and sadly thought that she had no charisma at all. The mother-in-law continued to talk about how almost 2 years had passed since she appeared in their house, and that she even specially called a fortune teller so that she would choose a suitable date and make them do it. The Duchess added that she cannot control her every action in any case, and then, slamming her fist on the table, she asked how lucky she thought she was to receive the title of Duchess. The Duchess shouted that there was only one reason to choose her, to which the girl sighed wearily and thought that her mother-in-law never tired of repeating this. And the woman continued to say that 4 generations of the girl's family had good fertility, and if it weren't for that, she wouldn't be needed. The Duchess spoke about how their family had a long history, and she could not bring anything to their family. The girl wondered why she tolerated all these offensive words. The mother-in-law, narrowing her eyes, looked angrily at the thoughtful girl, and then, asking about the promise she had given her. Looking into her wide-open eyes, the Duchess asked if she remembered their deal. The girl, smiling reassuringly at her mother-in-law, hastened to answer that she had not forgotten. At the same time, she thought how everything was annoying her, because it was not she who signed the contract, but Selina. The girl was confused by the fact that her past and current situations were different from each other. Propping her chin on her hand and turning away, the Duchess added that she was useless. The girl pursed her lips and became sad because she couldn't even say anything about it. In fact, she and her son never slept, and in order to pick a star, you have to look at the sky. The girl thought that now that the memories of her past life had returned, this was no longer a joke. She looked again at her mother-in-law, Camilla, who was sitting with a very displeased face. And then I thought, what if she gets involved with this woman, like Selina in the original Lady Corona? Then she will die, because in the original book, the girl was hanged. Selina frowned. She didn't want to become the wife who poisoned her own husband. She even shuddered at these thoughts, and the Duchess, noticing this, asked if she was cold. Her mother-in-law told her that the girl needed to take care of her body, because she still had to bear the receiver and take care of her head, because recently everyone was arguing whether she had gone crazy. The girl laughed at these words, saying that everything was fine with her body and mind. Suddenly, they heard some very strange noise and turned to the door. Selina and her mother-in-law, Camilla, were wary because this sound was familiar to them. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a maid flew into the room, screaming that the Duke had fallen again. From such a sudden opening of the doors and the scream, the cup of tea fell from the Duchess's hands to the floor and broke. Selina and her mother-in-law jumped up, wondering if this had happened again. They ran into the Duke's bedroom, where cries of pain were heard. The women looked with concern at the Duke lying in bed. Cold sweat ran down his body, which was convulsing and tormented by pain. The Duke gritted his teeth and did not open his eyes, his hands tightly clutching his shirt and sheet. Selina, looking at him, thought that even sick, he was still handsome. Mother-in-law Camilla rushed to her son, calling his name. Looking at the man, the girl continued to think that this was her sickly husband, Duke Amid Ypret, who could die at any moment. She remembered that in the original novel, he was only a minor character, so she had little information available to her. At this time, the Duke extended his hand towards the girl, and she took it with her own. And then I thought that they didn't have such a close relationship to hold hands. Selena looked at her husband and held his hand. The thought in her head was that this relationship was fake. But she doesn't care. It's very painful to look at him when he suffers like this. Everyone standing nearby told Amid to hold on and be strong. And the girl hoped that he wouldn't die just like that. Suddenly, the Duke squeezed the girl's hand very hard, and she thought about how a sick person could be so strong. She was in a lot of pain, but she couldn't take her hands away and told her husband to hold on. The Duke squeezed her hand harder and harder, and the girl thought that since she was supporting him, it didn't mean that he should use force. The maid who brought the basin of water told Selena that she was bothering her by standing there and asked her to leave. It was Amita's maid, whose name was Emma, and the girl looked at her unkindly. Selena cried and thought that she herself wanted to leave, but she couldn't because her husband wouldn't let her. Another maid, seeing that the young mistress was crying, tried to console her with words that the master would recover. Selena hoped that it would be so, and the setting sun illuminated the same luxurious mansion. The Duchess spoke to her son's doctor, who said they had passed the critical period. To these words, the woman asked why this happened so soon, since he had already fallen like that some time ago. Selena was still sitting by the Duke's bed, and he was holding her hand in his. Looking at him, she noticed that it seemed like Amid had woken up. And then, smiling, I thought that he looked like a real angel. At that moment, the Duke opened his beautiful blue eyes. The girl, not expecting this, opened her eyes and whispered his name. And the man, seeing her, whispered to Selena, just one word, go away. He closed his eyes again, and the girl anxiously asked him if it still hurt. Selena asked where it hurt and if she needed to call Dr. Raymond again. Instead of answering, the Duke squeezed her hand hard enough to hurt her. The girl felt a lot of pain. She didn't expect such actions. And then the man pulled her onto the bed by the hand and hung over her, telling her that he told her to get lost. Selena stared at him, her green eyes wide with shock. The man looked at the girl in anger and asked what she was looking at. Thinking that he was asking this seriously, the girl closed her eyes. Amid angrily told her to let go of his hand because it irritated him. Selena thought she could tell he was holding her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The Duke, letting go of her hand, stood up and looking at her, asked what she was doing, because he had asked her to leave. The girl smiled and thought that she needed to be patient and told her husband to calm down, because he shouldn't be too surprised or angry. And she continued that Raymond said this, and the Duke became angry at these words. And then, putting on an important air, he told her not to even dream of getting what she wanted from him. Selena's face darkened, and she lowered her head. She understood what he was talking about. The girl did not understand who and what said to the Duke that he began to speak like that. The man ruffled his hair and looked at her questioningly. Selena suddenly exclaimed angrily, "Did she say anything about this?" and asked him why he was behaving this way. The Duke looked at her angrily, and the girl answered him with a determined look and thought that she would not give up. The man stood with his hands on his hips in front of the girl sitting on the bed. Suddenly, Selena's gaze fell on a bottle of medicine standing on the nightstand. Saying that he needed to stop because he could harm himself, she took the bottle in her hands, and then, smiling, she suggested that he quickly take his medicine and go to bed. Amid moved away from Selena when she handed him the medicine, and she said that she was not giving him poison. And then, smiling sarcastically, she added that if he behaved like that, then she had only one option. Coming closer to him and looking intently into his eyes, she said that she would give it to him to drink herself. Smiling cheerfully and holding the bottle in her hands, Selena asked him to open his mouth and say, "A." The man looked at her and said that the rumors that she had gone crazy were true. Selena replied, with a smile, that anything was possible and looked at his face. And then she thought that he was not used to the fact that the girl, who in the original could only silently look at him, suddenly began to parry and argue. Selena remembered the way he looked at the medicine and wondered if he was that reluctant to take it. Looking at the man, the girl thought that, in fact, this man was deeply unhappy. After all, he joined the ranks of the Knights of the Sun, the most honorable guard of the country. But almost immediately after joining, he was struck down by an unknown disease. And even just lying like this in his room, he suffers from involuntary convulsions. Selena remembered the first time she came to his room at night, and the mother, who constantly repeats that she doesn't know when her son will die, so she needs to give birth to an heir as soon as possible. And the woman who followed her mother-in-law's orders, even though she was trembling with fear. And the Duke saw her for the first time, and was not happy with her presence. And that woman was she, Selena remembered, looking at the Duke. Amid seeing Selena's gaze, frowned and became angry. Angrily, through clenched teeth, he loudly told her not to look at him like that. The girl opened her eyes wide in surprise. She didn't understand how she could not look like that. The man, still through his teeth, added that there was no need to look at it like a dog dying in pain. And then he reached out and abruptly snatched the bottle of medicine from Selena's hand. It was so unexpected that the girl even opened her mouth in surprise. And then the man brought the bottle to his mouth and began to drink the medicine. Having finished drinking, he wiped his mouth and looked at the girl, and the drops that had spilled past him rolled down his chest. The maids who saw this blushed from such a gorgeous sight. Some turned away, and some closed their eyes. Suddenly, the Duke heard the sound of applause. It was the girl clapping her hands. The Duke looked at her questioningly. He did not understand what was happening. The girl, still clapping her hands, smiled, glad that he had taken the medicine. The maids looked at her and showed the Duke that his wife was not quite right in the head. Having forcefully placed the medicine bottle on the nightstand, Amid told the girl that now she was probably happy. Selena answered positively, and the Duke said that he had taken the medicine, and now she must leave. The girl smiled tenderly and closed her eyes, and then agreed to leave the room. As she was leaving, she turned to her husband and advised him to rest now. Accompanied by a maid, the girl walked along the luxurious corridors of the mansion. The maid asked the young lady if she was okay, to which Selena replied that she felt as if she had been in a war. The maid looked at her with sympathy and said that this was not the first time that the gentleman had really gone overboard. Selena thought that if she were in his place, she would also hate herself. The girl asked why Rona pretended not to know anything, because the other maids were talking about her and calling her a duchess who came here only to give birth to an heir. The maid began to say that she never said that, but Selena interrupted her, saying that she knew about it, but others sometimes called her that. The girl thought that Rona was one of those who could not lie. Selena, saying that she was fine, asked to leave her alone and waved her hand, and the maid, in shock, looked at the hand and drew the mistress's attention to this. The girl looked at her hand and saw that there were bruises in the places where Amid had squeezed it. She thought that everything had been fine before, and after moving it, she decided that since it moved, it wasn't broken. Turning to the window, the girl answered the maid that everything was fine, and continued in her thoughts, in contrast to the future that awaited her. She, brushing away her tears and looking at the girl's back, said that the young lady was so good. And then she added that the gentleman did not understand at all what kind of heart she had. The maid, wiping away her tears, thanked God that everything was well with her mistress. And then she added that for the last 2 weeks, she had been comforting the gentleman, and many were saying that the young lady had gone crazy. Selena turned around and looked at the maid with a disapproving gaze. The maid, out of shame, covered her face with her hands and said that she didn't mean it that way. Selena turned to the window and reassured the maid that everything was fine and that she understood everything. She, closing her eyes, continued about how in the eyes of other people she looks crazy. And then Selena looked out the window and thought that 2 weeks ago, her memories of her past life returned. And no one would believe the fact that this place was inside the book she was reading. And she doesn't have the most respectable role in this book. After all, there she is, the wife who poisoned her own husband. The subtitle of this novel, Lady Corona, was Veronica's Memories. The reason for this title is that the work came from the pen of the main character. This book is her memoirs. The story about Selena that Veronica told in the book was terrible. The girl was a villain who poisoned her sick husband, Duke Amid, and was eventually hanged. This story is written from the words of Camilla's mother-in-law, who was madly eager to take revenge on her daughter-in-law, who killed her son. There were many rumors in society about why Selena killed Amid, and Camilla paid the executioner to ensure the most painful death penalty. The nobles whispered that she was trying to steal the inheritance because she did not give birth to the promised child and eventually went mad. And because the Duke was ill, it was easy to poison him. They thought that she intended to receive all the property after the Duke's death and pitied him. Thanks to Camilla, Selena was put in the dirtiest cage and treated horribly until her death. The girl was led by the arms to the platform with the gallows, with the words that the criminal would be executed. And Selena, standing with a rope around her neck, like a demon, repeated the same thing, that she was not the killer. But all this was useless. No one believed the girl. And at Camilla's request, they tortured her for a very long time, and as painfully as possible during the execution. The executioners prolonged her torture, and people said that her neck broke only on the third day. When all these memories came back to Selena, her mental health began to crumble. She sat motionless on the floor and looked out the window, and the maids whispered whether she had gone mad. The girl did not understand why she was the one who ended up in Selena, and it drove her crazy. And then, she was able to pull herself together to find a solution and not repeat the fate of Selena from the book. But the novel, Lady Corona, is a biography of Veronica, from childhood to her ascension to the throne. That is why there is almost no information in the book about anyone or anything else. No matter how much Selena tried to analyze the novel, she couldn't find anything that could help her. A little earlier, the girl secretly entered her mother-in-law's office. Selena knew that somewhere in the desk cabinets, she kept important documents. Opening one of them, she found a contract that the original Selena had signed. The girl unfolded it and read it very carefully. It was written in it that Selena should give birth to a child from Duke Amid, who in the future would become his heir. After reading, the girl thought about the Duke, about how he looked at her angrily and spoke through his teeth. And then she remembered that her situation had not always been like this. Selena's family was quite wealthy, thanks to her father, who headed a large company. Her father sailed very often on his merchant ships, and on his last voyage, he got caught in a strong storm, and his ship crashed. The news shocked the mother, and she died due to the premature birth of her fifth child. At the same time, the father's business partners showed up and demanded compensation for the losses they suffered due to the death of their father. Selena consoled her crying younger brothers and sisters as best she could. She also had to take responsibility for the financial support of her family and go to work. The girl had to clean and wash the floors herself because there were no more servants. She also learned to cook, since she had never had to do it before. Selena also did many small household chores, such as mending clothes, and much more. Besides all this, she also had to work as an assistant in a pharmacy. There was nothing the girl did that made her hands rough and calloused. Selena, I had to sell everything that was in the house, but there was no more money. And yet, she still couldn't send her younger brothers and sister to school. One day, the Duchess came to her and asked if it was true that the girls from her family were famous for their fertility. And then, looking intently at Selena, she continued that this concerned her too. Selena did not understand why this noble woman was interested in this. Then the Duchess decided to tell the girl directly that she wanted her to give birth to an heir for her son. After all, Duchess Camilla gave birth to a very sickly son. And then she said that her son lives for today, not knowing at what moment he might die, and he became the only successor to the previous duke. Camilla added sadly that if he died, the duke's legacy would end. The Duchess urgently needed a successor, but no one wanted to marry their daughter off to a sick person who could go to the next world at any moment. And among the noble families, especially, there were no volunteers, so the woman, in her opinion, made the best decision. she decided to use a girl from a noble family, impoverished but with a good reputation. The Duchess told Celine that if she gave birth to an heir, she would pay off all her debts and provide a comfortable life for her younger brothers and sisters. The girl had good heredity and no parents who could have been against marriage with an unhealthy person. Selina met all the conditions of a duchess. She was the daughter of ruined aristocrats, and she had no reason to refuse, so the girl signed the contract. After getting married, she became a duchess and came to live in the ducal mansion. This story could have had a happy ending if Selina had given birth to a child. She would have had a very good life in which she would not need anything. But everything went wrong from the very first meeting with him. Duke Amid Ypret. In the evening, beautifully dressed, she timidly entered the room where the Duke was. There were candles burning on the table, 2 glasses of wine, and flowers. Duke Amid stood near the table and looked questioningly at the girl who entered. He didn't understand why they set the table for 2 and didn't expect to see her. And then, turning to the girl, he asked her who she was. Selina couldn't say a word, and she thought to herself that he was acting as if he didn't know anything. Amid asked what was going on, and the girl lowered her eyes, too embarrassed to explain anything. Selina thought about how she had been told that he was ill but looked fine, and the Duke looked very healthy. Amid looked at her angrily and asked if she would continue to remain silent. The girl was blinded by his appearance and thought about why he was so handsome. In her mind, he looked weak and exhausted from illness, since it was even necessary to enter into a marriage of convenience. The Duke turned away and said that if she was a new maid, she should go to the others and ask where her room was. When Selina replied that she had been told that she was spending the night with him, he looked at her in surprise. And then he thought about it and remembered that his mother had also told him to go to this room. This seemed strange to Amid, and turning to the girl, he asked again who she was. Selina, closing her eyes and thinking whatever happens, shouted that she was the Duke's wife. The man was taken aback by this news and stared at her with wide eyes. And then he asked when his wife could have appeared, if he himself knew nothing about it. Selina, fiddling with her dress in fear, quietly said that a month ago. And it wasn't a lie. A month ago she came here and began to study with Camilla. The Duchess taught her what to do to conceive an heir. After this, Selina signed the marriage contract, and she officially became the Duke's wife. She had no idea that her husband didn't even know about it. And then the girl said that she promised Lady Camilla that she would bear him an heir. The young Duke was shocked by her words and looked at her with a question in his eyes. Selina, closing her eyes and clasping her hands, thought that now he would definitely get angry. Not hearing cries of discontent from the Duke, she did not dare open one eye. The Duke sat on the bed, covering his face with his hand, and said that since he would die any day now, his mother wanted at least some seed to remain of him. Still sitting, and despite the girl, he told her to come to him. Selina was scared. She didn't expect this from a man. Amid grinned and asked her if he hadn't ordered her to come, since she had come here to have a child with her husband, who would die at any moment. The girl thought he was telling the truth, but she had never had such an experience. When the Duke asked if today was probably the night, Selina confirmed that the doctor said that today was a good day for conception. She remembered how she had been taking vitamins all week and eating only foods that were good for pregnant women. He looked at her questioningly, thinking that she wanted to say something else. And then, smiling evilly and putting her on the bed, he asked the girl if they taught her this. Selina lay and remembered what she had been told about Amid's weak body and that she should not put pressure on him. If he has an attack, call for help immediately, and he should not get overexcited under any circumstances. She even blushed at the memory. The Duke said that the mother and Raymond sincerely wanted an heir, and the girl thought about her mother-in-law's words, that this was not a game, but something she had to do to conceive an heir. Bringing his face close to hers, Amid whispered for her to do as she had been taught. The girl turned her head away from him, because her face was all red from embarrassment. The Duke grinned evilly and told her that she could not do it. Selina clutched her dress and looked at the man with one eye. She could not utter a word. Amid removing her hand from her dress, said that his mother should have taught her how to behave with him. The girl lay with her eyes closed and thought that he was just holding her, but she felt all his strength. And the man continued to ask whether they had really pushed her into his bedroom without even teaching her. The Duke's hand reached for her neck, and the girl wondered if he was going to kill her. Amid said that if you think about it, she was quite brave, and his hand went under the necklace and wrapped around the girl's neck. Selena asked him why he was doing this, and tears came to her eyes. And then, thinking that they were talking about him being sick, she decisively removed his hand from her neck and said that was enough. The Duke sat up in bed, saying that even if he killed her, his mother would bring another. Despite Selena, and with his head down, he told her to get out. The girl sat up on the bed, pressing her hand to her chest. She still couldn't calm down. She thought about her younger brothers and sisters, and thought that she couldn't give up now. Selena understood that then the end of the well-fed life would come for her family. The girl stood up and called the Duke, to which he rudely asked her whether he had ordered her to rush away or whether she had not heard him. Selena fell to her knees in front of him and desperately screamed that she couldn't. The man turned his head and looked at her questioningly. He didn't understand that she couldn't. The girl, folding her hands in a prayerful gesture, said that she was obliged to spend the night with him that night, and she simply had to do it. When he asked why, the girl remembered that according to the terms of the contract, she had no right to tell him. And then, Selena replied that only then would she be recognized as a real duchess. The Duke looked with displeasure at the girl, who was still kneeling. Selene thought in despair that she did not want to be thrown out. The Duke could choose a second wife, but if she was thrown out, she would have nowhere to go. Closing her eyes, she told Amid that if he wanted to kill her, then let him kill her. But she could not leave. She wondered in her mind if he would really kill her. And then she heard the Duke stand up. Opening her eyes, the girl saw that he was standing in front of her and had a knife in his hands. Selena's eyes widened as she looked at the knife in fear. The girl closed her eyes again and screamed in fear, asking to be saved. The Duke grinned and asked her how she was able to enter the bedroom of a man she was seeing for the first time, if she was so afraid. Selena looked at Amid pleadingly and said that she had brothers and sisters, and she couldn't die. The man waved the knife, and the girl closed her eyes in fear. She expected a blow, pain, death, but none of this happened. And then, Selena decided to see what was happening and why she didn't die. She looked at the Duke with wide eyes in surprise. Seeing that he had cut himself, she screamed loudly in horror. The Duke, standing with a knife, said that she was screaming too loudly, and his blood dripped from a cut on his hand. Selena asked him what he was doing, and then covered her mouth with her hand. Amid confirmed her guess, and then added that the girl could continue screaming, which was even good. The man explained that there were maids outside, and this was the newlyweds' first night, and if it was quiet, they would suspect something was wrong. Selena realized that he was not going to kill her, but was doing it on purpose, so that everyone would think that they had slept together. Looking at the standing man, the girl asked why he was doing this. The Duke did not answer this, and began to take off his shirt. Selena watched him do it, embarrassed, and thought that he was well built. Amid, sitting on the bed, told the girl to bandage him with the shirt she had taken off. Selena tore a piece of his shirt and tightly bandaged the wound on the man's arm. And then, inaudibly, she asked him why he was doing this. To this question, the Duke responded with a question about whether she wanted to sleep with him. The girl lowered her head and blushed, saying that she didn't mean it that way. Amid, looking tired, added that they probably set a condition for her to give birth to his child, since his mother was a duchess. Looking intently at the girl, he said that he did not know what she had been promised for this, and he continued by saying that she wouldn't be able to achieve what she wanted, so it would be better for her to keep quiet about everything. Selena wondered in surprise if he was really suggesting that they pretend to have a relationship but not sleep together. Standing in front of the girl, the Duke said that this meant that she would never bear him a child. The girl remembered her younger brothers and sisters, and the disgruntled Lady Camilla, and she asked Hamid if he did not want an heir, to which the man replied that this is what his mother wanted. He thought that the mother, seeing how life was draining from her son, found a girl without a family and threw her into his bedroom, because the first thing she thought about was an heir. Selina hung her head, thinking that she had made a big mistake, asking him to save her life. After all, she thought only of herself, not understanding at all what it was like for him to be with an unloved woman, just for the sake of giving birth to a successor. The girl cried and thought about how he felt and what she had done. The Duke looked at her in bewilderment and asked why she was crying. Selina cried bitterly and asked for forgiveness, thinking that she had definitely gone crazy by signing a contract with the condition of having a child. She remembered the happy faces of her relatives, who were delighted to be going to school. And there is a lot of delicious food on the table. Selina thought that she should go to the Duchess and terminate the contract, and she would find some way to survive. She thought that this was all wrong, and even if she got into debt again, there was no other way out. Selina asked the Duke not to tell the Duchess about everything that had happened, to which the man replied that he had no such thoughts. The girl raised her head and looked at the Duke in surprise. Hamid repeated that he would not tell his mother, and then asked her why she thought he was doing this. And then the Duke explained that everyone in the estate would think that they had slept together. Selina immediately asked him again why he was doing all this. The man looked at the girl and started talking about how if he didn't sleep with her today, his mother wouldn't calm down. And he continued, saying that she would continue to slip girls like her into his bedroom. Selina didn't even know what to answer the man to these words and listened to him in silence. And the Duke continued that the next morning, when the maids saw the marks on the sheets, they would report this to the Duchess. And then her contract will not be terminated, the man added. They looked at each other, and the Duke said that in this case, each would get what he wanted. That was all he could do for her. Selina read the contract she pulled out and remembered that it had been a terrible night. And then I thought that now the situation had changed and the pressure from Camilla had increased. And now that Selina knew she had become the villain from the novel, she decided she couldn't die such a horrible death. She thought that no matter how well the contract was drawn up, there was bound to be a loophole in it. Selina reread the contract, which stated that if it was completed, she would pay 500,000 ducats, and if she ran away, she would have to pay a large fine. Sighing sadly, the girl thought that this was about 5 billion. She cried and asked God how she could sign such an unfair contract. And then, in the corner, Selina saw something written in small print. It was stated there that if the reason for continuing the contract disappeared, it could be terminated. She was delighted to read this and thought that it was a wonderful note. And then, having read to the end, she realized that of all the unfair points, only one was in her favor. Selina remembered that her mother-in-law said that if her son had been healthy, she would never have been able to marry into their family. She realized that the only way out was to force Camilla to demand a divorce from her first. Selina, smiling at her thoughts that everything could be easily resolved, imagined the Duke healthy. Through the white clouds, the sun's rays broke through, illuminating the ducal mansion. Selina came into the Duchess's living room and asked her if her mother wanted to see her. Camilla looked sternly at the girl and replied that she had called her to ask when she would finally give her good news. The girl smiled and said that she was trying and asked her mother not to worry so much. Casually, the Duchess said that Hamid had had another attack, and rumors were circulating throughout the estate that she had gone mad and that this was the reason for her worries. The girl thought that this was a reaction to the fact that her memories had returned, but she could not say anything about it. The Duchess angrily said that if she could not get pregnant, then she would have to return the time and money spent on her in full. Selina smiled and said that she understood about it because it was all written in the contract. And then she added that, in fact, she also had something to say to her mother-in-law. The girl became a little nervous from Camilla's gaze, and it was the first time she had said such a thing. Selina said she wants to take charge of everything that has to do with her husband. The Duchess did not understand what the girl was talking about and asked what she meant. Selina, looking at her cup of tea, replied that she knew too little about her husband. For example, what does Amid eat? Does he walk enough? What time does he get up and all that? The girl continued to say. Camilla looked at her with a frown and asked why she was interested. Selina said that it was the Duchess who looked after Amid to this day, and she only sat next to him when he was unconscious and thought that they always tried to keep her at a distance. And then, with a smile, she added that she wanted to take care of the Duke's health because he was her husband. She was embarrassed because it was the first time she had said the word husband herself. The Duchess grinned and said that Amida's well-being was being taken care of by Raymond, and it would be better if she concentrated on her duties. The girl replied that in order to get pregnant, she would pay more attention to her health and thought that everything was not so simple and she needed to move on to Plan B. Selina made a sad face and said that she was taking all the pills that Raymond prescribed for her. And then she added that she also found it strange that this did not happen, since they had been married for 2 years. Perhaps the problem is something else, the girl hinted, to which the Duchess asked what the problem could be. Selina, looking down, said that for a successful conception, not only the health of the mother is important, but also the health of the father. And then she added that Raymond couldn't possibly know all the intricacies of their relationship. The Duchess, horrified by the thought that had slipped through her mind, asked what the girl was talking about. And then she added, looking at Selina, she wants to say by this that her son is sterile. Camilla, slamming her hand on the table, said loudly that this was impossible, and Raymond never told her that this was the reason. The girl smiled slyly and asked how a doctor could know about such a thing. And then, looking at her mother-in-law, she added that she was the wife, after all. Selina gently touched her mother's tightly clenched fist, and then she said that in order to pay off her debts, she worked as a nurse, and people thanked her for the good care. The girl also added that she worked as a pharmacist's assistant and even made her own medicines. And Selina asked Camilla to let her take care of her husband because she wants this child more than anyone else. When the Duchess agreed, she thought she had really succeeded. Leaving her mother-in-law, the girl thought that all that was left to do was to deal with Amid. But suddenly, the Duchess called Selina, and when she turned around, she said that she could not allow her son's condition to worsen. And then she added that if she finds out that Selina has bad intentions, she won't just let it go. The girl looked at her mother-in-law with a submissive gaze, and then, closing her eyes, she bowed to Camilla and agreed with everything. Selina walked down the hallway and thought that since Camilla gave her a chance, it was like gambling for her. And then she resolutely told herself that she absolutely had to save Amid. The girl approached her husband's room and was about to knock when her hand was intercepted by the maid. She removed the girl's hand from the door and said that the Duke was now resting. Selina looked at the maid with displeasure and thought how she could forget about this girl. The girl, with superiority, told the maid that she had come to see her husband and had not invited her. Emma said with a smile that the Duke really didn't like being disturbed. It was the maid who always belittled Selina because she was a poor noblewoman. And she also thought that Selina lived here only to give birth to an heir. But now, the young lady decided not to turn a blind eye to this anymore. She folded her arms across her chest and firmly told the maid that if she interfered with her, the girl would tell her mother everything. Emma asked fearfully if it was true that she could tell the main lady everything. Selina confirmed this and said that her mother had entrusted her with the care of Amid's condition. The girl thought that the method was not very good, but now she has to rely on Camilla's strength, and it helped. Selina smiled. As expected, the maid left, and she knocked on the door and was given permission to enter. The girl entered the room and saw Amid sitting on the windowsill and looking out the window. He looked at Selina, not understanding why she could have come. And the girl was a little embarrassed, because no matter how you look at him, he is so cute. The Duke turned away from her and asked her discontentedly why she had come. Selina smiled tenderly and called the man by name. Amid looked at her in surprise. He didn't expect this at all. And the girl, smiling sincerely, asked if he would go for a walk with her. Selina stood before him, in the rays of the sun that shone through the window, and extended her hand to him. The Duke looked at her with displeasure and asked if she had gone mad or was up to something again. Selina thought she knew he would react that way. She smiled and replied that the weather was nice today, and she decided to take a walk with her husband, as all newlyweds do. The Duke looked at her questioningly and said that she had called them newlyweds. The girl reminded him that they were a married couple, not brother and sister. Selina noticed that Amid had turned pale and asked if everything was okay with him. The man stood in front of the girl and repeated once again that he was fine. The girl reached out to him with her hand and asked again if everything was okay. The Duke waved her away with his hand and shouted at her to leave him alone. Selina lowered her head and became sad. She pressed her hand to her chest in fear. Amid looked at her and said that he had probably gone too far. After these words, the girl smiled and again asked him to take a walk with her since everything was okay. Amid got angry and shouted what kind of nonsense this was, and since when had they been walking together? Selina replied thoughtfully that, in other words, she was simply trying to cure him. And then she added that to be healthy, you need to walk in the fresh air every day and get enough sunlight. The Duke leaned towards the girl and looked into her eyes with a displeased expression. Selina was very scared, but she decided that this time she would not back down. The girl resolutely said that she had received her mother's consent, and now she would take care of his health. Amid was surprised by her words and asked again what she was going to do. The girl repeated that she would take care of him and his well-being. Grabbing the girl by the shoulder, he said that she had conspired with his mother again, and Selina thought that he had a grip of steel. The Duke went on to say that she had decided to take a different approach since he had not slept with her or told her about their agreement. And then, taking her by the chin, he asked her if she had decided to give birth to his child again. Selina tried to push his hand away and then told him he had misunderstood her. The man did not believe her, and when she tried to explain to him again, he touched her sore arm, and the girl screamed in pain. The Duke, looking at how she held her sore hand, asked what was wrong with her hand. Selina didn't know how to explain to him that it was he who was holding her hand, squeezing it very tightly. The man looked at the girl with a guilty look, and then asked if it was because of him that her arm hurt. Selina thought about what he remembered and confirmed it by saying that he had squeezed her too hard back then. She kept thinking about what was going on with him, because he usually denies everything and walks away. Amid had a very guilty expression on his face, and he did not look at the girl. Selina looked closely at her husband's face and wondered if he really regretted doing this. The girl smiled slyly and thought that she could take advantage of this. She, holding her sore arm, said that it was very painful. Amid's face darkened, and he asked guiltily if he had broken it. Selina looked at him and said that he almost broke it, and it still hurt. And then she asked how one could grab a person by the hand like that. She even turned blue. The girl, wondering if she was putting too much pressure on him, added that Raymond was helping her with her treatment. Suddenly, she heard quiet words of apology and was so surprised by this that she even asked again what he said. The Duke apologized sincerely and said he would be more careful. Selina looked at her husband, her big eyes wide in surprise. She thought that he might be like that, and the man's ears turned red. The girl regretted that she was the only one who could see this side of him. Selina decided that since this had happened, she should take advantage of it, and, smiling, invited him to go for a walk again. The mansion was surrounded by a beautiful park where everything was green and full of flowers. The maids looked in surprise at Amid and Selina walking along the paths and greeted them. The girl, holding her husband's arm, was talking about how fresh the air was because yesterday's rain had killed all the dust. The maids were talking in surprise about what was happening. It was unexpected for them to see their owners walking together. The Duke wearily asked what the girl would receive for this walk together. Selina smiled and replied that it was nothing. She was just trying to improve his health. In the novel, the nobles discussed that the relationship between the spouses was not very good, and the Duke hated his wife. And they added that it was because she married him only for money that the girl thought it would be great to rewrite the history of their relationship. When they reached the moon garden, the girl said that it was the most beautiful place on the estate. Running there, she turned around and called the Duke to come with her. But suddenly, a black cat jumped out in front of the girl and scared her. Selina started to fall, but strong hands prevented her from falling. It was her husband who grabbed her by the back with one hand and took her hand with the other. And at that moment, they looked at each other. The girl thanked the Duke, and he let her go, holding her slightly by the elbow. Selina didn't think he would pick her up, and it was very unexpected. She looked at the cat that almost made her fall. It was Noir. The girl sat down in front of the cat, whom she had not seen for a long time, and asked how he was doing. And Amid asked if it was her animal. Selina was very surprised that he didn't know that Noir was their estate cat. To which the man replied that he had no idea that they had such a dirty and fat cat. The girl laughed and said, "The cat is just black, but if you look closely, he is a very cute and charming baby." The Duke said with an important air that if she touched the animals, she would catch some kind of infection from them. Selina, who was about to pet the cat, changed her mind. And standing up, she said that maybe he was right, and for the sake of his health, it was better to avoid such problems. And then, smiling at Amid, she added that there was nothing wrong with being careful. The Duke looked at his wife in surprise, and then, coughing in embarrassment, he asked what the cat's name was. The girl, still smiling, answered, "He's Black and Noir, a suitable nickname." Amid replied that it was not a very grand name, to which the girl said with a smile that his name had previously been Chimney, but she had given him another name. The Duke noted with a smile that the cat was the color of a cat that looked like it had actually fallen down a chimney. Selina was very surprised to see her husband smiling. She stood and looked at the man who had turned away, and then she asked him with concern if he was cold. And suddenly, the girl felt that something had gotten into her eye. Amid turned and watched carefully as she tried to pull it out. And then, removing her hand from her eye, he asked her to wait. The Duke leaned very close to her face to see what had gotten into her eye. The sun was reflected in the girl's eyes, wide open in surprise. From the outside, it might have looked like the young people were kissing. Amid carefully removed what had gotten into the girl's eye with his fingers, and then, moving away from his wife, he showed her what he had pulled out. Selina was confused and wondered what was wrong with him. She remembered that just as suddenly, he had caught her when she was falling. The man looked at her questioningly, and she thought about whether he hated touching her. And suddenly, Amid started coughing, which greatly alarmed the girl. And then, looking down, he suggested that she come back. Selina asked worriedly why. Maybe he was having trouble breathing or had chest pain. The Duke told her with displeasure that everything was fine and that she should not fuss. With a sigh of relief, the girl agreed, saying that tomorrow they would go for another walk. To this, Amid, with a displeased face, said that he did not say that he would walk with her every day. And Selina reminded that from this day on she takes care of his health, and daily walks have a beneficial effect on his well-being. The man angrily asked her why she needed this. Thinking that he was angry, the girl replied that it was for his health. Sighing wearily, the Duke told the girl to stop talking nonsense. The girl was indignant at this because she was sincere. The man grinned slyly and asked her if there was any sincerity in their relationship. Selina thought that she was doing this to improve their relationship because she really wanted to cure him. And then she asked Amid why he didn't believe her words and constantly doubted. To which the Duke replied that he knew what agreement she had made with his mother and why she was here. The girl wondered if her husband really knew all the details and conditions, and the Duke continued to talk about how she would be paid if she married a man who could die at any moment and had a child with him. Selina had nothing to say because it wasn't a lie, and that was enough to judge her. And then Ahmed said that he felt uneasy because she had so suddenly stuck to him. And also, he doesn't care that she took such a pathetic role for herself, for the money. The girl remarked that he knew how to express himself beautifully, and that it seemed to his soul that it hurt 100 times more than his body. And then, getting angry, she added that something was wrong with his head. The Duke looked at the girl in surprise, because he had never seen her like this, and she added that if a person says something, then you need to listen, because she said that she is doing it for him. Selena added that she doesn't want a child from him, because she hates having one from such a rude person like him. Grabbing Amid's hand, she said that they were going back to the estate because he couldn't catch a cold. She grabbed it with her sore hand and screamed in pain. The Duke asked her worriedly what had happened and if she was in pain. Selena replied that everything was fine and that she had simply forgotten that she was hurt. Saying, "Let me see," the man took her bandaged hand in his. The girl did not expect such actions from her husband and was surprised. And the Duke, having said that the bandage had loosened a little, began to tighten it, and the girl thought that the more they got to know him, the more she realized that she knew nothing about him. His care was unobtrusive and seemed to come from a pure heart, and even in simple touches and glances, she felt tenderness. And the girl decided that the sore arm would need to be used in the future. And the man, continuing to bandage her hand, asked if she was a fool. To his wife's questioning look, he replied that only a fool could forget that she had damaged her. The girl was embarrassed and surprised to think that he was worried about her. The young people stood opposite each other, and the wind played with the rose petals. After some time, the Duke tightened the bandage on the girl's hand again, and then, looking at her, he said that they were coming back. Turning around and walking away, Amid added that she shouldn't do anything stupid again. Selena looked in surprise, first at her husband and then at her hand. Walking after him, she still couldn't bring herself to take his arm again. Selena's voice was heard in the mansion, saying that she had returned. As the girl entered the room smiling, the maid, Rona, called out to her. The maid looked very happy, which surprised Selena. She even asked what was wrong with her. Rona replied that she had some errands to run, and she saw everything. When asked what she had seen, the maid replied that she had seen her mistress kissing the Duke in the moonlit garden. The girl thought that there was a misunderstanding, but then Rona said that she thought they were only that hot in the bedroom, and she added that all the maids were already talking about it. Selena was embarrassed and wondered what could be interesting about this, and then I decided that it was not even bad. That from the outside, everything looked so good. Rona was very happy for the lady because she had gone through many difficulties. And what a blessing that the two of them get along so well, she said, in a fit of emotion, taking her mistress by the hands. Selena thought about how Rona was her only ally because she always helped her. Their meeting was a little unusual because, unlike the other maids, she herself took her from the slave market. This is how she saved her from a crazy father who decided to sell his own daughter. Her mother-in-law and the other maids were unhappy when the girl brought her. That's why Rona always stays by her side when other maids treat her with disdain. Selena told the maid that even if she had to leave the estate, she would take care of her wedding with Robert and help her buy a house. The maid was very surprised that the young mistress knew about this. Selena smiled and thought that everyone knew about it, and she added that Rona shouldn't worry because she wouldn't tell anyone. The girl lay down on the bed and decided to rest because she was tired. But then the maid remembered that Raymond would come to see the girl. Selena complained that Rona did not tell her about this until she went to bed. Sitting up in bed, the girl asked Rona why the doctor wanted to see her, to which she replied that she didn't know. Then there was a knock at the door, and the maid said it was Raymond, and he was just in time. Entering the room, the doctor asked the young lady how she was feeling, to which she replied that she was healthy. Raymond responded that he was glad, but nevertheless, he needed to be checked regularly, and began the examination. Selena thought that he always made a very pleasant impression. The doctor examined the girl and said that everything was fine, and he did not see any problems. And then he added that last time, the girl got caught in the rain and looked very exhausted. Raymond gave Selena some medicine and told her to take it for a period of time to restore her energy. The girl agreed and thought that he spoke quietly and calmly, and therefore was able to win over any interlocutor. And so, even for Duchess Camilla, he managed to become one of the few she trusted. Selena looked at the medicine given by the doctor and thought, after all, it is the doctor who has access to Amid and controls all treatment. It seemed to her that Raymond had a direct connection with the Duke's death. No matter how much the girl analyzed the novel, she still did not understand how she could poison her husband. And then I thought that someone must have killed Amid and framed Selena. After all, poison could have been added to food or medicine, and until recently, she had no right to touch these things. And she decided that this could be done by the one who had these powers, the one who was trusted the most. Raymond, seeing the detached expression on Selena's face, asked what was wrong with her. The girl replied that she was thinking, because she was already taking medication for infertility, and now she would be taking this too. How many medications were there? The doctor smiled and said that he understood her concerns, but she had to take care not only of her husband, but of herself as well. Then Selena remembered that she just wanted to talk to Raymond about conception. To this, the doctor said that when he examined the girl, he did not notice any signs of pregnancy. And then he decided that maybe he missed something and wanted to check again. The girl stopped the doctor and said that it was not her fault. And then, looking at him sadly, she said that the problem was her husband. Raymond was very surprised that Selena saw a problem in Amida. Selena was concerned and said she wanted to know more about his illness, and maybe there was something she should know. And then she asked if there were any serious abnormalities in his body. Raymond smiled and replied that there was nothing like that. Selena added that she would like to know about all medical conditions, medications, diet, etc. Raymond asked with a smile why the girl suddenly became so worried about this. Selena sadly said that she realized how inattentive she was to her husband. The man thought about it because he didn't want to tell the girl anything like that. Selena sighed sadly and said that there was something she doubted she was telling him. She looked at the doctor and continued that everything was very complicated. And then she added that Amid was not the same in bed as before, which greatly surprised the doctor. The girl said that it was very personal, and it was difficult for her to talk about it. The doctor coughed and said that when he examined the Duke, he did not notice anything unusual. Selena responded with feeling that he couldn't know all the details because she was his wife. Raymond apologized for being too arrogant and promised to listen to her words in the future. The girl smiled and said that his words gave her strength, and she thought to herself that this was probably how he had gained his mother's trust. Selena said that he had to tell her everything because it was important to the case they were trying to solve. The girl listened very attentively to everything that Raymond told her. They talked for a very long time, but the sky outside was still blue, and roses were blooming in the garden. Rona saw that the doctor had left the young lady's room, and he was tired. She looked into the room, and seeing Selena humming, asked why she was in such a good mood. The girl turned around and said with a smile that she had consulted with Raymond and was going to the kitchen to help the chef prepare a diet for Amid. For some reason, Rona was afraid that the young lady was going to the kitchen. Selena didn't pay attention to this and called the girl with her. And then she noticed that Rona somehow didn't react to this and asked why she reluctantly agreed. To which the maid replied that Chef Jean was the best in cooking. And then, when they went into the kitchen, she added that he was very scary. When they entered, Selena was surprised because the whole room was in smoke. She found it difficult to breathe, and the girl raised her handkerchief to her nose, adding that she did not expect the Duke's kitchen to be like this. And I thought that I didn't know anything because I wasn't interested in household chores. Suddenly, steps were heard behind the girls, and someone asked them who they were. When the girls turned around, they screamed in horror because there was a man standing there with a large knife in his hand. When they calmed down and sat down at the table, Jean apologized because few people come into the kitchen, so he thought they were thieves. After all, he couldn't even imagine that the young lady would want to see him. Selena thought that when Jean lowered the knife, he looked much softer. And then the chef asked why they came to him. Selena replied that she wanted to talk to him about the amid diet. Jean was very surprised that the young lady was interested in the Duke's diet. The girl asked to show her husband's menu first. The cook asked her to wait a little and then brought the menu. After reading it, Selena said it was healthy food that was easy to digest and not heavy, but it lacked animal protein. She asked Jean if he had made this menu, to which the chef replied that after he puts together the menu, Raymond checks it and sometimes makes adjustments to it. He explained that the Duke was very weak and his digestive system was not working properly, so they were preparing light food and then asked if there was any problem. To which the girl replied that there were no problems with cooking, and she thought he was a wonderful cook. But people need to eat meat, she added with a smile. Jean was very surprised. His head was filled with images of baked chicken, fried steak, and much more. Selena clarified that she meant that it was not enough to fill you up, and even debutantes ate more. She remembered Amid's perfect body when he took off his shirt on the first night. The girl was embarrassed and thought why this picture was in her head right now. She continued that the Duke was the commander of the Sun Knights, which meant he was a strong man with a strong constitution, so he needed to eat more. Selena said that she was sure that Jean could cook a fairly light dish, even one made from meat. The cook replied that Raymond had said that suddenly eating meat could have a negative effect on the body. Selena, at that moment, looked at him in such a way that he fell silent and looked back with a question in his eyes. The girl smiled sincerely and said that he would definitely cope with it because he was the best cook and could prepare healthy and simple food. Jean, inspired by these words of the young lady, said that he would try. All these words helped Selena become friends with the chef. They worked together on a new menu for Amid and cooked together, and the idea came up to move the kitchen to a better location. It so happened that the nobility was ashamed of the kitchen and hid it in the basement, and Jean had no choice. Selena didn't understand at all why they wanted to eat gourmet food with such an attitude towards the chef, and so she decided to move the kitchen to a more spacious and cleaner room. The girl also said that she would help him calculate the budget so that he could buy ingredients for the dishes. Selena was persistent in convincing Camilla that cleanliness was important when preparing food. And then she added that it was important for Amida's health, and the Duchess agreed. Selena carried a tray of food and thought, as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. Coming to Amid, the girl said that today she brought special food that she and Jean had prepared together. Putting the tray on the table, she said that they tried to make the dishes tasty. And then she added that they combined as many healthy ingredients as possible so that they were light and filling. Amid looked at the food that was brought in surprise and said nothing. And the girl, smiling, asked about the fact that everything looked delicious. When the Duke took a spoon and decided to try the soup, his maid stopped him. Emma said that it was imperative to check if there was poison in the food. Rona responded to these words by saying that the young lady had already checked everything, having personally tasted each dish. Selena stopped her maid, saying that everything was fine and that these were the rules. She looked at Emma and told her to check because it was unacceptable for Amid to get sick. And she added that it was good that she was faithful to her duty and let her continue in the same spirit. Emma looked at Selena with pursed lips and confusion, and the girl, still standing opposite, smiled sweetly at the maid. Emma apologized to the Duke and asked him to wait a few seconds. Amid told her not to bother and he would just eat it. Emma picked up the stick she used to test for poison in food. At this time, Selena said that it was still worth checking, and it was better to be sure. The maid thanked the young lady for her understanding. Selena watched as she checked the food and waited for the results. Emma, finishing and wiping her stick, said that this food was not dangerous. Amid took a spoon and finally began to eat. He hesitantly scooped up some soup and raised it to his mouth. And then I ate it and was very surprised, because it was very tasty. Selena smiled, looking at her husband, and thought that it really did taste good. And she could be proud of herself. Amid, in surprise, ate everything that was brought to him, leaving all the plates empty. The girl was delighted and praised him for eating everything quickly. And then, looking at the Duke and clapping her hands, she said that this was excellent. And she added that now, in order for the food to be digested, she needed to take a walk. The man looked in surprise at his wife, who smiled sincerely at him and extended her hand. When Amid stood up, Emma stood in front of him and told him in a commanding tone that he couldn't. Selena didn't understand what was happening and why the maid was giving orders. The Duke looked at her sternly and asked with displeasure why it was impossible. To this, the maid replied that first he needed to take some medicine. Selena looked at the maid and thought that she was usually hostile towards her, but now she became even more aggressive. Emma handed the Duke medicine on a tray and asked him to drink it. Amid, looking tired, took the medicine. And Selena thought, looking at her husband, that she hadn't tested these medications yet. She looked closely at the bottle of pills and recalled the conversation with the doctor. Raymond gave her a list of the medications the Duke was taking to study. Thanks to her experience working in a pharmacy, it was not difficult for the girl to understand the recipe. There were simple tranquilizers and herbs, and the medicines themselves were of high quality. Selena asked Raymond if there was an energy-lowering drug among the medications, since she was interested in the lethal outcome, but she could not arouse suspicion. The doctor thought for a moment and then replied that there was nothing like that. Then the girl smiled at him and thanked him for the information. In the novel, she poisoned her husband, so she should be careful when asking about medicines. Emma, at this point, asked Selena why she was looking like that, to which the girl replied that everything was fine. The girl thought that the composition of the drugs was impeccable, but there was no guarantee that they were prepared from the specified ingredients. The Duke approached her and, looking at her, asked what she was doing. And then he added whether they would go for a walk. And Selena, looking at him, thought about how charming he was. But he has a terrible character, the girl thought, and, taking her husband by the arm, replied that they would go now. The Duke looked at his happy wife with surprise. They left, and the maid Emma looked after them with displeasure. Selena turned around and looked at the angry face of the maid. And then she decided that she had to get these drugs anyway. The girl even got goosebumps from Emma's gaze. She hates, or maybe is jealous, Selena thought. The young people walked along the park paths again, and the servants they met greeted them. Suddenly, the Duke stopped abruptly. He thought he saw something. When his wife looked questioningly, he said that he thought he had just seen a large piece of dust fly by. But then, on the path, they saw a black cat sitting and meowing. The girl, seeing him, joyfully called the cat by name. And then, sitting down in front of him, she told the Duke that the cat had very clean paws and that he could not be dust. Selena stroked the cat and talked about how he was secretly hiding in this big mansion. And the Duke thought that Noir really liked his wife and asked why he was hiding. The girl was embarrassed and replied that at first she thought the cat lived on the estate. But then she saw the cook scolding the cat for stealing food and running away. The Duke looked attentively at the cat and his wife, who was crouched in front of him. And the girl, looking into Noir's shining eyes, thought that her husband was going to kick him out because he was dirty and infectious. Selena stood up and asked the Duke not to drive him away yet, and she would find a place for him. And the cat looked at Amid with pitiful eyes and meowed. The Duke looked at the black cat, Noir, with pity, and then he asked if he demanded that she throw him out, would she do it? Folding his arms across his chest, he added that these were just words, that she would take care of him, since she couldn't even vouch for herself. Selena exclaimed with fervor that she would take full responsibility for Noir. And then, seeing the cat rubbing against her dress, she told him that he shouldn't do that. And she added that if he did this, he would stain her clothes and add trouble to the maids. Amid asked in surprise why she was so worried about it. Selena became sad. She couldn't explain that it was because this was one of the few part-time jobs she had before moving to the estate. After all, he didn't know how hard it was to wash and prepare white and warm clothes for wearing. The girl also heard the maids discussing whether she had too many clothes to wash. Amid said with bewilderment that this was their job and they were paid for it. So why was she afraid that the Duchess's clothes would get dirty? Selina said she wasn't afraid and thought he couldn't understand that. And then she noticed how the cat came up to the Duke's feet and began to rub against them. The girl took him and moved him to another place and said that this was not possible because there were germs on him. Amid smirked at this and said that she was touching him everywhere. What incredible care! The girl, standing by the tree, exclaimed, asking who she was caring about then. Suddenly, the Duke looked at her in horror and interrupted her speech. The girl fell silent and thought about whether she had crossed the line again. And then she felt something cold and slippery on her neck. It was a snake that rose up in front of the girl's face and hissed. The Duke told the girl not to move, and the snake crawled into her bodice. The man approached her and asked her to stand still. And suddenly, he abruptly grabbed the snake under the head and removed it from Selina, and the girl exclaimed that it was very dangerous. He squeezed the snake's neck with force and killed it. The girl looked at her hand in shock and thought how lucky she was she could have bitten her hand. Amit apologized for scaring me and asked if my arm hurt. The girl replied that everything was fine and worriedly asked her husband how he was because the snake was big and had huge fangs. The man, closing his eyes, said that he seemed to have a bite mark on his left hand. Selina took his hands anxiously and said that they needed to call Raymond right away. She looked up at her husband questioningly when she heard him trying to hide his laughter. And then Selina asked why he was making fun of her because she was really worried. And then the Duke could no longer restrain himself and laughed merrily. Selina was very surprised that this man could laugh so sincerely. She kept looking at him the whole time he was laughing. And then the Duke looked down and said that it looked like her dress was ruined. The girl first thought it was because of Noir, but then she saw where her husband was looking and covered the torn bodice of her dress with her hands. The Duke, seeing his wife's confusion and fear, began to take off his shirt. And then, putting the shirt on the girl, he said that it would cover her. Selina looked gratefully at her husband, who stood bare-chested in front of her. A little later, the Duchess called Selina to her for a conversation, and they sat at the table and drank tea. Camilla said that she and her son were caught in an indecent state.